G'day everyone, Matt Elder here, and just thought I'd do this first of a two-part sort of series on people, systems, and tech, and doing an overview. While it's great that we have applications and software and all those sorts of things for our property businesses, we need to be able to put that into a context and a framework so you have basically it meeting a business need rather than having the technology driving the business. With this, in general, if you go to the website www.ukhomefinder.net/resources, it will have the second part of this video and also others where I just talk about different things relating to tech, so you might want to check that out. What's been happening lately, particularly in the UK with the property sphere, is you're getting much more regulation and it's pushing for much more professionalization. So the consequences of that is a lot of the amateur type landlords, they're in the next couple of years, if they haven't already, they're selling up. It's getting too difficult. So within that sphere of things, there's two things to really be considering here to keep revenue in the business profitable and taking over. Fundamentals, you can either increase revenue and or decrease costs. And while there's been a lot on the increasing revenue, so changing your business model, your strategy to something which is a higher cash flowing or those sorts of things, technology can really help look at decreasing the costs and can be quite effective in that regard. Generally, businesses you can break down into three things, at least for the context of what we're considering here. You got the people, you got the technology, and then the systems and how they interact. So if you have a potential tenant call up, wanting to view a property, you'll have a whole system in place of recording details, setting up the appointment, arranging for keys, having somebody there, and then everything which goes around that. And it's looking at how these all fit together. Most businesses are generally very people heavy because technology is has historically, at least in the UK real estate sector, been quite a lagger and quite weak. While everybody might love their right move, the actual businesses doing anything beyond that is generally using few bits and pieces, having some systems, but it's very people heavy and orientated. The way which I like to look at this is using taking advantage of technology and its efficiencies, and it is in relative terms quite cheap relative to people, which can have a high cost per hour. Technology too, generally has a high uptime, so 99.9% of the time it'll be working. Yes, there are viruses and attacks and things like that which can slow things down, but then the cost of that is generally much lower. Yes, there can be an initial steeper learning curve in implementing the technology and the systems in place, but in the long term, it's there, beyond, by and large, they're 24/7, 365, whereas obviously people having holidays and downtime and getting sick and all those sorts of things. So it was probably heard a lot of times, you should go through and systemize the business, and that's great, but how and what does that mean, and how do you actually go about it, and looking at breaking that down. And a lot of the time your current systems will just feel like a train wreck. It's all over the place, it barely works, barely functions. And then other times when you're in business, particularly from starting off from small businesses, you're just laying the track in front of the train as it's coming along. You're just responding to what's happening, trying to figure out what the business actually is. The framework which I'm going to talk about here is really fleshed out and developed in the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'm just going to be picking up bits and pieces of that, but for a more detailed analysis and way of being able to think about this, I highly recommend this book and checking it out. With small businesses, there's generally three phases to the business. There's the idea of that you work in the business, you work on the business, and then the business is working without you. So in terms of you working in the business, what that generally relates to is that if you stop working, the business basically stops. So you've just moved from the rich dad poor dad idea and moving in quadrant sectors, where you've gone from being an employee to a business owner, but your business is still you. So the next stage of doing that is starting to develop in systems and processes and checklists so that you can start employing other people using technology, outsourcing. So you're spending some time building up the systems for the business. Excuse me. And then once you do that and you get really good at that, you can have it so more or less the business runs without you. So you've put the systems in place, you got the technology, you got the people working, and it just runs without you. And a lot of historical companies and companies on the share markets and things have gone beyond and independent of their original owners. Excuse me. One thing that the E-Myth talks about is, from the very beginning, setting up an organizational chart and trying to define the roles within that. So in the early days, you might have an organizational chart where you as the business owner or you and the partner basically come across all the different roles. So in a lettings business or a property business, you might have sourcing, you've got some lettings, you've got some marketing, people doing viewings, referencing, checking documents, inventories, and then trades, which come along and just manage the lets as they're going along. General operations in terms of managing your documents, having your systems, financial, having bookkeeping, accounts, systems related to that. If you're doing some refurbishments and who falls into that, and then also investment. So you can initially start out, and by doing that, you can start allocating people, and then as you're going through, start writing out the job descriptions and the roles and what each person is doing, and develop the business out from that point. And that can be particularly useful also too if you've got yourself and a partner are in a business, and when those are clearly defined as to who has responsibility for what, it can then reduce friction and issues with decision making, as it's very clear who has the primary responsibility for those areas. So the next question with all of this is just how to start. You know, it's great that we can talk about systems and getting to that point, but what's the initial building blocks? And it's as simple as just pen and paper, and just start creating lists. Like when you're purchasing a property, which could be a vanilla buy to let, and you're doing it with a mortgage, even just saying you're conveyancing, there's 53 different documents that I'm aware of that you can be asking or to see, and trying to remember all of those, you're just not going to be able to do it. There's going to be the occasional person who's a memory freak, but beyond that, you just can start going through, and each time you get to a point where you're about to exchange or your key milestones, you can go back and revisit these lists and go, right, okay, have we seen all these different documents? Is there something outstanding? And it just helps you to be quite sure that what your business process, it's there and it's working, and you can keep adding to it and having it grow organically. And once you've got those checklists starting off in place, then it's easier to start handing that out to somebody else or employing somebody. You've got a really good starting point. And part of this is just the idea of get perfect later. You don't want to be waiting to develop your system out fully before you start moving forwards with the business. It's that usual idea of, if you waited for every light to turn green before you set out going to a destination, you'd never start. There is that idea of just needing to start, and yes, you are laying the track in front of the train and not 100% sure of which way to go, but if you aren't moving forward in that direction, then there can be lots of money being left on the table. The next thing is just moving along, particularly when we start talking about technology and applications, is for some of us older generations, understanding how software has changed over the time. Once upon a time, you used to buy a product like, say, Microsoft Office. It came in a box of all things. You put it into a computer, install it, and that was it. Maybe occasionally you get a service pack update or something like that, but by and large, it was a one-time purchase. It remained relatively static. Now, particularly with the internet and what it's generally referred to as cloud computing, you've got this idea of software as a service, which we've probably come across previously. In terms of the applications are cloud-based, and Google Apps is a good one with that, with Gmail and Docs and calendars and things. The Microsoft version of it is Office 365 with the subscriptions. You're paying it on a monthly or yearly basis, and they're able to update the software as and when they decide that's required, so it can keep on moving forward. And there's lots of, there's thousands of different apps which are all based upon that model. So just understanding that. So within the context of that, though, that means that there's thousands of different possibilities. And what we've tried to break it down here for a property business, at least, is these are the main apps to start off with, and trying to allow for an entry point. So if people are not particularly comfortable with technology, what's the easier way to start having the small wins, get for the low-hanging fruit? And at least for a property business, with these apps which I've recommended here, or at least said these are some things to consider, you can basically be running a property business from them for less than £50 a month, which in the grander scheme of things, if you're trying to run a property business and you can't afford that £50 a month, then you've probably got either the wrong business model or you shouldn't be doing it as such. So as we see on the left-hand side, you've got sort of like a red, amber, and green sort of traffic light system. So as you start from the top, the idea is you start at the top and you work your way down in terms of implementing applications. So the first ones in the green, they're sort of like for people who might have a low technology understanding or not really comfortable with it. And then as you move down into medium and then high, they start becoming more sophisticated and requiring sort of more knowledge with it. So as we're going through it, on the left-hand side, I've just listed the general name of what the program or the style of application, and then some suggestions around what it could be. So for email, using Gmail, which is generally free, or G Suite and paying a little bit extra. Password manager like LastPass, basically just having a way of keeping all your passwords in one manageable format. So particularly with these, they will generate unique passwords, whatever combinations of letters and special characters. So if there is a point in time when an account is compromised or hacked, because all the passwords are all different, you're less likely to get a crossover. And they hacked one account and people might only have 4 passwords that they use across all their different applications. You've got a high level risk and exposure there to further problems and issues. File storage like Dropbox, Google Drive, SpiderOak is another one which has a high level of encryption. A general web browser like Firefox. I particularly like Firefox because then there's another little plugin extension called PropertyBee, which is free, which is really quite handy. Unfortunately, only works with Firefox. It can be temperamental, and Firefox just recently updated, so it was having problems, but now it's working again. Your business document creation, Google Docs or Office 365, using a mind map like SimpleMind, if that's the way that you think. Having a web domain too, so rather than having joeblogs.wordpress.com, it's just joeblogs.com. So the domains for that you can usually do for about £1 a month. It just gives a better looking professionalized aspect. A task tracker such as Asana, data capture, particularly Evernote and Web Clipper. Get lots of information which we sort of save for later, but then there's no real way of pulling it back out. Evernote is great in that regard. It's really got a great search function within it, so you can grab stuff off the web rather than having 10,000 bookmarks and never being able to find something in. And those sort of round out the medium level. Now when you get down to the higher level, they're starting to get more in-depth applications. Something like for accounting, Xero is quite good, and the other one which I really love tagged onto that or integrated with that is Receipt Bank. You get a receipt, you take a photo of it, it automatically goes through, extracts all the data out of it, so the price, the date, the VAT, the supplier, and puts it into a digital format, and it can link straight through to Xero. Such a time saver. Then you have CRM or customer relation management. Something like, I know Podio, people use Podio, or less annoying CRM. I like Zoho just because I'm a little bit more technical and I can customize it and program it out to do exactly what I want it to do. And a property manager such as, again, Podio and Zoho, and there's others applications out there that you can also use for that. The other interesting thing, I'll just move on to the next one. So that gives you an overview between those applications where you can start using and getting together for your property business. Then you can start moving on to a higher level, which I sort of call nodtastic. And the question is, when you've got these thousands of different applications, while I've given you back here a group of 12 or so and some recommendations, if you are looking at other ones, the next question of anything that you'd be asking is, does it integrate with Zapier, or if this then that? This I'll do on Zapier, and if this then that, some other series on it to explain what they really are. But the general idea is you have a lot of these other 12 or so applications, and how you get data between them becomes a bit of a challenge. And that's where if this then that and Zapier comes into it. They can be sort of like the bridge between two applications, and that's specifically what they do. So if there's a software developer, then by and large they only have to just make it compatible for Zapier or if this then that, and then within that can automatically go out and link to hundreds of other applications, rather than as a software developer them trying to link to those other 700 applications. And what the benefit of that too is, because there's so many different applications and being able to transfer information between them, should a particular application decide that they want to start pushing their prices much higher, or they're not keeping up with developing their products, then it's much easier within your own business with the applications you use to swap them out for different ones. Maybe a competitor has really been focusing on some R&D and they've got some great features and things. It's not like previously where once you made a purchase of your software, you became really locked into that proprietary system, and trying to migrate or move away to a different one was really problematic. And this helps getting around those. And what I've generally found is, sometimes they say Zapier is more for the business and IFT is more for free stuff. I generally find Zapier is much better at integrating apps directly together, whereas if this then that is much more at integrating, what they're calling the Internet of Things. So integrating your lighting into your calendar or those sorts of things. That's if this then that seems to be stronger in that. And then just other things which I've sort of listed as the efficiency running your business in terms of having some sort of website which is WordPress based, where they're always developing templates. There's a lot of developers out there who understand and can quickly put those together. Having the ability to send SMSs from your computer, such as mightytext.net, which then allows you to have groups and send multi-messages to tenants and prospective tenants. Having some sort of phone answering service, and then for team communication, having something like Slack. So those are kind of trying to put together, a dozen or so apps, getting a bit of an idea on how to navigate through those, where to start. My suggestion would be, with these first lot of apps here, start at the top, start at your email type ones, and just move down. And the ones which you haven't used before, spend an hour or two, download them or create an account. Most accounts these days, they'll give you free trial periods, and the help is usually quite good because it's in their interest to flatten that learning curve, so then you can come into their ecosystem and start paying. A lot of these applications these days have very good walkthroughs or tours or videos explaining how to do things, so it's quite easy to get up and running. The other thing when we're starting off with businesses, a lot of the time we're sort of bootstrapping apps and things together that we're aware of and that we know how they work, and just trying to get them to work together. So that's at one extreme. And then at the other extreme, you've got like a full agency. So if you're a giant estate agency like Foxtons or something like that, there's very large and expensive programs which are being developed, all singing, all dancing. The middle ground is really tricky. There's has looked at lots of different things as the business has expanded, and generally found that's where software is a real challenge in at least the property space, because they either do certain things very well, or they're not very flexible, or you have a business and you're trying to do things a certain way and the software doesn't quite gel in with that. And that's where I think too the if this then that and the Zapier start really coming into their own, trying to be able to fill some of that middle ground. So yeah, just to sort of sum up for the first part, we sort of looked at the context around trying to develop systems, looking at some of the applications to put into that sort of space, and also just sort of looking at the general idea between people, systems, and technology. So this is going to be the end of this one. On the website, anywhere, ukhomefinder.net, down in the bottom right hand corner here, there's a little subscription area, so if you want to get onto the list there, so you can find out about when new videos and contents come out, that's a recommend there. Otherwise, you can get a hold of me at those contact details. Instagram's another good one, using a lot of that very visual. So I'm on there at mattelder_UK. Alternatively, I also developed a data research tool, mrtool.co.uk. Thanks very much, and talk to you soon.